Okay.
So Scott Martin is a co-founder of Mediators Beyond Borders, and I'll let him, of course, talk a little bit about how that organization started and what his role is. He's a 2017 Peace Fellow, attending the location in Thailand where they have a program there for the Peace Fellowship program. He's traveled the world, got a fascinating story, which I'll let him cover most of it. But he's done work in Rwanda and Sri Lanka, and I'm sure he's done work in a lot of other countries that are too numerous for me to mention. He's done a lot of work with Rotaractors and RILA. He speaks to administrators and teachers, and he speaks to veterans, and he's just got a tremendous breadth of experience. I think you're going to really like his philosophy, and I don't want to get into some of the surprises that I'm going to maybe ask him a question about later in the meeting. But I'd like everyone just to give a warm District 5010 welcome to Scott. Scott, thank you for being here this morning, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Oh. Thank you. Great, wonderful to see all of your faces and to get to interact with a few of you ahead of this. One thing I'd like to start off with doing is inviting you all to do something that's a little strange on a Zoom call, but invite you all to stand up. And if you're wearing pajama bottoms, I apologize ahead of time. So I want to give you about 20 seconds to this will be shorter for Andre as he's in his Jeep, but maybe you can run around your Jeep. But find something of your home of meaning, and you have 20 seconds to go find it, and then you're going to hold it up for the screen for everybody to see and put why it's meaningful to you in the chat. Ready? Go. Let's see. Can't hardly see it. I guess you put it in there. Wonderful. Okay, now everyone in the chat, tell me what your object is, your name, what the object is, and why it's important to you. Take a gander at what everyone's objects are as well. Yep, dumbbell. Yeah. Cool. All right, now include in the chat why those are meaningful for you. Wonderful. So as you're doing that, I will begin the presentation. Let's see. I think I share screenability here. Share from the beginning. All right, that works for everybody. Super. So the exercise we just did is part of the work I've been doing since COVID-19 hit, and part of that is to separate ourselves from the idea that we're trying to recreate a facsimile of an in-person meeting. This doesn't represent an in-person meeting. It's nowhere close to it. But instead, how can we use technology to connect with each other differently? When I was an architect, I guess I still am a licensed architect, what I'd want to do is meet with people on the weekends in their homes, because I didn't want to talk to the guy who is a boss of X, Y, and Z and had employees and had to make business decisions all day long. I don't want to meet him in his office when he was in a suit. I want to talk to the guy who was at home with his family. And so when you start looking at that, you can hear differently, and you can hear someone differently because they're speaking from who they are in their home as a parent, or as a someone with pets. And so you start looking at even the interruptions that we experience on this format is not as interruptions, but as reminders of why do we do this and why do we connect in the first place. That was just an example of how we can humanize where we are, and we're all in our homes, or we're in spaces that are meaningful to us. And so bringing an object and being able to share that with each other connects us to that in a different way. So when we meet as Rotarians in clubs, we meet on one level, but we have an opportunity to meet on a whole different level here. So we're not trying to recreate an in-person meeting. We're not trying to create a Rotary meeting. We're not going to be successful at that. But what can we do with this opportunity we've been given? And so that kind of leads into the talk I'm going to share with you all today. And what I've entitled this work that I do is called 2 Drops of Peace, because it's sort of how do we inoculate ourselves with peace, and so that we can build resiliency within our communities and build a tolerance as things come our way, like the one we're facing right now. So if I do my job today, there's 3 objectives. You'll feel inspired, you'll feel more connected, and you'll feel more empowered for the work that we do as Rotarians. So the way we're going to go is part 1 will be a little about my journey, or who the heck is this guy. Talk a little bit about who Mediators Beyond Borders is and the Rotary Service Partnership and what's possible. And most importantly, what's the work that we can do together moving forward. So the journey of one of the stories I'm going to share with you started here. And some of you might recognize this as the Wailing Wall in Israel. And I stood at this wall and I realized it was totally superfluous that I was standing. There was no good reason for me to be there, other than, expansion and, personal development and all those great things. But the only reason why I was there was because of the person my father decided to be. And what hit me in that moment was how he wouldn't call it sacrifice, but he lived the life he did so that I could have the life I had. He got married to my mom when they were 16 and 17, which effectively meant she got kicked out of Bishop Montgomery High School at that age, and decided to stay together, create a family. He had to drop out of Boy Scouts, didn't get to complete Eagle Scout, but then got later honored with being a Silver Beaver as a Cub Scout leader, and has later formed a family. Then I decided that I had all these gifts that I've been afforded that I could give back to him. So I lead men's circles and men's weekends. And so I made him come on a men's weekend with me. He didn't know why he was doing it. I never learned to swim because he was a swim instructor at the Y. And so out of defiance, I never learned to swim. And so I decided that I would have him teach me in the pool how to swim a lap properly. And we trained for a triathlon together that year. Also shared with him my love of travel. We went to Cambodia that year together, and the arts. And all of these pieces kind of culminated into a place that might be familiar to some of you. You might recognize this as a picture of Burning Man. And so he and I got to share this experience together, with wild costumes and wild stories. We're rangers. So we helped to not police the city, but they're sort of the mediators of the city, and got to do this together and have some strong family ties, as you can see from that. And just what was able to happen when you can take these gifts and share them with another human, in gratitude. And why that pours into here is a little bit of my story, of how I've been able to adopt all of these different titles throughout my time, but one of the most important ones are being a peace builder and being a Rotary Peace Fellow. Are you all familiar with this place? This is Tuscany. And this is how my journey sort of changed, because while I was here doing learning architecture, from a childhood goal was always to be a landscape architect. And that's what I did. I started a business when I was 17 years old doing that. And then an unfortunate event happened. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Italy when this occurred. We swore that the person had mistranslated what had happened, and so were horrified when I actually saw it on TV and realized that the Italian translation was actually correct. On that day, I had a startling sort of reaction to what occurred that day that stuck with me. And rather than being really pissed off at these people and wanting revenge, I looked at this and said, that's how loudly someone had to speak to feel listened to. And what does it cost us to listen? And to call somebody crazy or a terrorist pretends like you know something that I know nothing about. It's not the thousands of people they killed that day that concerns me. It's the one. They didn't sort of think they were doing the right thing. They were absolutely sure they were doing the right thing. And in order to take your own life to do it. And so what I saw in that was a responsibility to try to understand when there aren't many people trying to find that middle ground. And so it wasn't going to be enough for me to be just a landscape architect any longer. I did open my office and I got to do work, as Andre said, around the world, some beautiful homes in Dubai and India, as they're in the coast of California. But I also bifurcated my life. I was one of the founding members of Mediators Beyond Borders and got to work with groups in Africa. And I get to teach conflict resolution in schools and use large community dialogues using with the police and inner city kids. It's really fun things that I got to do, but I always split my life between two things. Also have a fun business that rents living Christmas trees. It was on Shark Tank, and so Mark Cuban's my business partner. These all seem really separate until you put them together and put them in an application, being urged by some of my Rotarian friends to apply for the Rotary Peace Fellowship program, which is sort of what brings me here with you all today. And the learning that came from that. And I walked into this room, that picture up in the corner there, and I wanted to do a complete 180 because I thought, what the heck am I doing here? These are all really intelligent people from all around the world, and where do I fit into this? And the answer to that is that there aren't any experts in peace. There aren't anyone that can say, we did it this way here and this way, another way, and that was successful. When they brought professors to us at Chulalongkorn, it was a series of, this is how we failed, this is how we could have done better. And you realize what gets you a seat at the table for peace is passion. And that you care for the people you're working with and you care for the outcomes. And what better representative than that than Rotary? One of the key learnings, I go back a little bit, that I learned from this, one of our professors talked about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and which starts with food, shelter, clothing before you can have security, a sense of community and identity. And he said, well, but when it comes to conflict, it's actually upside down. Because if one group can threaten another group and say they're going to take away their identity, then they'll go to war and they'll give up food, shelter, clothing, security, and community, all for that sense of identity. And so it turns out in peace building, one of the most important aspects is honor and dignity. And that's the thing that we as Rotarians can bring to these communities. It doesn't cost anything. Bring honor and dignity and listen and show up. Another piece that stayed with me, and that's how we're getting into this talk today, which is one of our professors was asked to be on the ground in West Africa during the Ebola crisis. At that time, 80% of Ebola patients were dying. That's how he showed up to that environment, and it hit him one night in the middle of the night. And he thought, well, if 80% of the patients are dying, that means 20% are surviving. What does it look like to tell the story of those 20%? And what he found in that 20% is a unifying piece was this belief that they were going to live and that they had a community around them and they were not isolated the way that other people were. And so that was a unifying story that you could then tell and use to spread a story and change the social narrative. And so when I looked at that, I remember that when I heard of everything being canceled, and our Rotary meetings are canceled, our conventions canceled, we're being told we have to stay away from each other, we're being told we need to stay in the home. There's a lot of stories about what we can't do, and no one telling a story of what we can. And so in Rotary, one place why we're, I think, so effective in peace building is because we can speak to all different tracks. We speak political tracks, we speak business and community leaders, and we sure as heck are really good at grassroots and community development. And so in the vacuum of leadership and each country wanting to isolate and take care of their own people, who steps into that role of global leadership, particularly around the area of peace? And my proposal is that it be Rotary. And what a better time to make tangible peace, which for so many, even Rotarians, is a sort of an abstract idea. I can count the number of blankets we hand out, I can count the number of wells that we make, but how do I count peace? And in this time, it struck me that way we do that is by connecting with one another. We make peace tangible by connecting all the different parts of Rotary. And so I called together, got a lot of the leaders of the area of peace together, and we had a town hall, and we came up with 3 distinct things that we could do as the area of peace, and particularly led by Peace Fellows, to give back to Rotary during this time of hardship and difficulty, when the very fabric of what it means to be Rotarian is threatened because we don't have our club meetings and we can't meet in person. And so we came up with these 3 objectives back in March of what we can be doing. And so I want to share a little bit of what those look like. I'd previously had a program called the Peace Conversation Facilitation Program, which was intended to address club conflict that people had in clubs, and use these 40,000 clubs, including Rotaract clubs, to become hubs for peace in your communities. That Rotary really could be who it gets looked for peace, because we're apolitical, a-religious. We really hold that center ground for conflicts within our communities. First step, of course, is to be able to address and talk about the conflict within our clubs. So this program needed to be retrofitted to make an online experience. And so that's what we've been doing. One of your neighbors of District 5040, we're going to be actually working with the Nisga'a Nation to deliver this training, both on territory and within the Nisga'a Nation, and with the Rotarians in 5040, working with other Peace Fellows on that program. We also created a online database. So these are, we put out a call for RPFs, and I heard that several of them have actually spoken here already, but create an entire database of Rotary Peace Fellows who had ready to go content online, engaging interactive content that they could lend to clubs looking for that content and looking to be connected, and partnered with that training. The other piece is we launched a whole series of webinars, and the theme is imagining what's this world going to look like, what's peace building going to look like after, we call it the great pause, but after COVID-19, what's it going to look like? So we've already had 4, our 5th one is going to be on Thursday, and I'd invite all of you to be a part of that. The last piece I'll share with you is this Global Peace Conference that's coming on. At the time, we didn't know that the virtual conference was going to happen, and so just by chance the dates work out so it doesn't conflict with it. But what we're doing in terms of a vision is sort of going beyond how conferences have happened in the past, where it's located in one area, and if you're not in that time zone or you can't get to Honolulu, you're out of luck. And we designed a program that stretches over 3 different time zones at different times. So everyone has local programming, but you can also join a track on a different side of the world. If you want to get up at a different hour, you could use the art in this map to attend a workshop on the other side of the planet. And all of them designed to be interactive and learning structures, and all of the breaks line up. So everybody's on a break at the same time, and we might do a dance class or yoga or mindfulness piece, or a treasure hunt, a home-based treasure hunt kind of piece. So that the idea is to be able to connect all of the family of Rotary together, along with people who are doing this work in the field. So not just Rotarians, but also non-governmental organizations that are active, and so that we can expand the family of Rotary to include these and have the Peace Fellows really be that that conduit in between, where we can go and what we can be doing as a people together. How are we doing on time? I might skip Andre, how long do we have?
You have till 11.
Oh, great. Super. So I'm going to minimize the screen a little bit. Let's see if I can end the show here. And I'll just talk you through the instructions here then. So I'll stop sharing, we can all see each other. And so what we're going to try, and I'm going to put the instructions actually in the chat, which is for 1 minute. So we're going to do is I'm going to put you all into breakouts. As do we have a breakout function? I guess I should check that first. You know what? It looks like we don't have a breakout function for this group. I'm the main host, right, Rosie?
I can make you the main one.
Yeah, will you make me the main one? Let's see if
Um,
While she's finally
There.
fiddling with, I'll give you the instructions. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put you all into breakout rooms in pairs. While you're in there, I'd want the first person, and you're going to time each other. You speak for 1 minute continuously. Don't stop. You're going to talk about the last time you were inspired. And you're going to share with that person for 1 minute the last time you were inspired. Now, the listener says nothing, only listens, doesn't try to fix or add to your story. After that 1 minute, then you will switch, and that listener will tell the speaker exactly what you heard in the order that you heard it in. So you have to remember, it can't take notes. You're just listening to that person, and you're going to repeat back exactly what you heard for 1 minute. After you change the minute, after that 1 minute, you're going to switch, and the listener becomes a speaker. And the same thing, you're going to tell that listener 1 minute for what you were inspired on, and then they're going to repeat back to you exactly what you heard. So with that, I'm going to put you all into breakouts. 11 breakout rooms, and we'll see how it goes. Actually, you know what? I'm going to really take a second to admit the last time you were inspired. And this should, the second person is going to go just repeat exactly what you heard. And then you're going to switch. Great. Everyone have fun, and I'll see you in about 4 minutes.
Hey, I'm Lindsay. Are you and I paired up?
Well, I see 4. So I'm Paul. I see Stefan and Don. Are the 4 of us?
I don't know. Am I on this group too, Paul?
I don't know. I maybe it's just the 2 of us.
Well, maybe it's just the 2 of us. Who wants to go first? You or me?
I'll go first.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'm timing it too. So 1 minute. When last time I was inspired, I think I just got my a new bicycle about a week ago, and I decided that I was going to take a ride with it down to Westchester Lagoon, which is about 7 or 8 kilometers from here. And so I got on it, and I first have to go and negotiate some routes on the trail. And I figured, okay, I'm going to go off the trail and go right over the grass and not have to hassle of those routes on the, breaking through the bicycle trail. Then I got onto this nice stretch where there's some water on the right, and it's actually moving water, so it has some nice sounds. And then I kept on, there's another 2 stretches, and I came up on people who were walking. And I figured, some people say, on the left, or they have a horn, and I just slowed down and sort of would try to interact with them about, that here I come. And it all went very well. I mean, it's good interactions. And then there's another section that they cut down the trees right next to the pathway to, I guess, clear things out. And then there's another stretch of running water, the actual Campbell Creek. And then Valley of the Moon Park, where there were a group of people having a party. And then to Westchester Lagoon, where there were a bunch of seagulls on this island in the middle, making a lot of racket. So I made a little video of that and sent it to my niece. Oh, so I'm going to say that was a minute. I don't know if I started my minute, but okay, the end.
Okay. So my turn?
Yeah, well, you're feeding back what you heard for a minute, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, you live in Anchorage, and you got on your bike and you went on the bike trail, and you went out down to Westchester Lagoon. You went through the Valley of the Moon Park. You came upon pedestrians, and you just slowed down, not knowing whether to go to the right or to the left. And then when you got to the Westchester Lagoon, there were, did you say seagulls? And that you videotaped them? And then you probably shared that with your family. And all in all, you had a pretty good day. And I used to live in that area, so I can visualize all those places that you went to. I used to ride on those trails too when I lived in Anchorage. I used to take my kids down to that, where the geese are and the ducks. And my son, when he was about 2, would call them gucks. He wanted to go feed the gucks.
Okay, well, that's a minute, and now it's your minute to talk.
So I was inspired in church Sunday. Our pastor Shannon's pretty dynamic in that he kind of really paints a visual picture of Bible stories. And he was talking about the prophet Elijah rather, and God sent him out in the desert, and that he provided for him. He provided a stream for him to drink from, and the crows brought him food every day. Well, I guess the moral of the story is that nothing lasts forever, but God will find you a new revenue source, if you will, once the stream dries up. So he sent him to this village to be taken care of by this widow. But the only difference is God told Elijah, but he didn't tell the widow. So you've heard of the NIV. Well, we heard the NHV, the New Hood version. So Shannon brought one of the young guys up there, and who played the part of the widow. And he says, "Yo, dog, what do you mean I'm supposed to feed you? I got enough flour and enough oil for one loaf, and my son and I are going to eat that, then we're going to die, dog. So I don't care if you're a man of God. Get out of my house." I thought that was pretty real. And, obviously you probably know the rest of the story. God made sure the flour and the oil never ran empty. But the way he brings it to modern, he did another illustration. Imagine coming to somebody's house and say, "Yeah, can I have some water?" No. "Oh, can I have that last piece of
That's 1 minute.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
That was it.
So who would like to volunteer to repeat back what you heard?
Well, I was in the group with him, so I was hearing that he was with a group of people at his church and was hearing a story from one of the, very well-known and, followed books in our society, the Bible. And it was a way of relating the current situation that we have, sort of timeless situation with people in terms of what was going on with this, whoops, I hate that. So anyway, that's what I heard, that it was inspiring to be able to connect a timeless story with things that are happening to us today. So
Cool.
That may have been a minute, I don't know.
Good job. Wonderful. So I think I'm gonna bring back everybody. Did you get to share as well? Did you get to share your story also?
I did.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm gonna close all the rooms and bring everybody back. I guess I'll bring them back slowly.
That was fun, Paul.
Yeah.
Martin, this is Alan, listed as Mari, but I have the Rotary background. I just want to say you have the beginnings of a wonderful mustache. You need some wax to put on it and train it up right there. Come on.
I call it my it's my mood ring, so you can always tell how my day's going by which way the mustache is firing.
Next case, I want to be on your left side with more curl.
It comes and goes. Yeah, you saw the one of my dad. We both grow it out for at least once a year together. All right. I think everybody
Is that okay?
back with I'll invite you to throw mute back on just so we can. Great. And I might call on someone to share about. So Jess, unfortunately you're right in front of me. Jess, would you like to share what that experience was like with you? Specifically, what was it like to be listened to like that?
It was good. I was paired with Joe, our DGE, and it was a really good conversation. I guess I didn't have a lot of time to think about what I was inspired about, so I felt like I bumbled a little bit, but he was a good listener. And then switching the roles, it was fun to hear, and Joe shared one within the Rotary experience and then one personal as well, which was great to hear the difference of the two. But it was a good experience, and we had some conversation afterwards and kind of talked about, I said, I feel like I'm a better listener face-to-face because I can read body language better and make eye contact and take notes sometimes. And he agreed as well. So
hold that thought.
Oh.
Yeah, great. Joe, how about your experience on the other side? What was it like to be a listener like that, be in service like that? How did that feel?
Well, that's an interesting thought, because people know that I tend to listen and then go on, and I tend to forget, probably because I'm just moving on a lot of stuff. And it was less likely to forget this way, actually actively listening. My wife is a psychologist and points out I'm not the world's best listener. So this was a very useful thing to do as a reminder that, be better.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so I'll share with you. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of you for working through some of that technology and hearing me a little bit. And so some of the glitches are some of the things I want to also talk about. So there's a couple pieces, and just what you spoke about is one of the reasons why they call it Zoom fatigue, that your brain gets tired after being on this video so long, because my lips moving and my expressions don't match what I'm saying. And that little glitch makes it difficult. Also for a lot of us, so I have multiple screens and multiple smiley faces where my camera is, so I know to look at my camera. But if I were actually looking at you in the eyes, I'd be looking down here because that's where you are on my screen, but it doesn't look like I'm looking at you, which is difficult for us when we're communicating. There's positive and negatives to it. One, it feels more comfortable and you build trust when you can see somebody's body language and you reference it and it's familiar to you. But the other thing you do, and Joe, you've probably experienced this, is we fill in the blanks. We can process information way faster than someone can speak. And so what our brain does is fills in what we think the person's gonna say versus what we think they're gonna say. Also, we judge based on their facial expressions what they mean. But unless we know them really intimately, we don't know what their facial expressions mean. We just know what our interpretation of their facial expressions means. So this requires us to listen more intently and more closely to what the other person has to say on this medium. So there's hurdles, but there's also advantages too, because we are forced to listen to each other on a different level as far as that goes. Now, the other piece I'll ask you is, and you felt what that felt like to be there. How long did that exercise take? And Joe, you're unmuted, so you might as well answer.
Oh, under a minute to speak and to reiterate each way.
Yeah.
I've read that about 90% of communication, interpersonal communication, is nonverbal.
Yeah, which is true, right? So in a lot of it is that information that we're adding to this as we're talking, communicating to each other. So these are the instructions that we more or less followed. But that whole exercise took about 5 minutes. And why I point that out is because of the connection you were able to make with each other just in those 5 minutes. But how often do we say that we're too busy to make time for the people who are most important to us, our colleagues, our loved ones, our coworkers? And what we say is that we're too busy. And in Japanese, this is the character for busy, which includes absent and heart. And it's really what we're saying when we say we're too busy is we're absent to what's going on in our life. Rather than, I have a lot of things going on. I have 5 minutes for you now, or I've got 24 minutes, or I've got 20 minutes for you at 4:30. And how would that sound differently to the people that we care about the most in terms of how intently we can listen to them? Now, the other piece about remembering what you want to say is that one tool for listeners is you don't have to remember what you want to say is if everything comes from the thing that they're saying. So in part of listening, if you're listening to them, they'll tell you the questions they want to be asked, and that you don't have to remember yourself. Now, another piece of this, I'll need to go back in order to do it, did you have to agree with the person in order to listen to them? In order to repeat back what you heard, did you actually have to agree with them? And the answer, of course, is no, you didn't. But how often do we find ourselves saying, I can't listen to that person. I don't agree with a word they say. And what we're actually saying in that case is, I choose not to listen to this person, because it's not a requirement that I believe you or I believe in what you're saying in order to listen. And in my job, I actually find it more useful to speak to people that I don't agree with. So I'm forced to learn. We'll get into that. But our first kind of key to deep listening is suspending that judgment, and understanding you do not need to agree to listen. Letting go of winning and losing. When the Charlottesville thing broke out, and one of my friends posted, so how do we win over minds so full of hate? And my response to her was, you need to give up winning. If we're trying to win or lose an argument, well, try to lose a win, but if you're trying to win an argument, you're also not listening. You're just sitting there ready to try to beat up the person with something they say or missay, but you're not actually listening to what it is that they're telling you. And that gets to the next one we referenced, listening for what you don't know. I don't know how many of you have watched the same movie or read the same book over and over again, but I don't prefer to spend my time in learning. And so speaking with someone whom I already agree with everything they have to say doesn't sound super interesting to me. But if I enter into a conversation looking for the parts that I don't agree with and I need to learn from, then the conversation gets much more interesting and I find that I'm much more engaged. But what we tend to do is the opposite. We listen for only the parts of the story that we agree with. It becomes a pretty boring conversation pretty quickly. Separating the person from the problem. This becomes difficult in my work when someone has a swastika tattooed on their neck. And it becomes really difficult to separate the person from the problem. Except I look at that and I say, well, I won't even commit to a bumper sticker on my car, let alone a tattoo like that on my body, let alone a tattoo like that on my face. What had to happen in this person's life that that's how loudly they need to communicate to feel listened to? And so instead it builds empathy and a lot of questions. I know nothing about this person. Why in the world would I make an assumption about them when I clearly know nothing about them? And the last one, super important for us Rotarians, this idea of bringing service versus solution. One of the things that creates anxiety around listening is the idea that I think I have to solve someone's problems. And as a mediator, you need to know that I am actually uniquely unqualified to solve anyone else's problems. I can ask them a good question and I can listen. And parties come to me and they want to resolve this or that. And I say, well, I can't promise the other person's going to listen, but I promise you I'll listen. And so I'm able to bring that service of listening to somebody. We were I was presenting in the conference in Atlanta and had this Bahamian woman, Rotarian, and she gets up and I made the mistake of sort of handing the microphone out to the crowd. And I could see she was animated. And she got the microphone and she said, there's this woman in my club and she thought bad about me and then she hit my face and I hit her face and she got kicked out of the club, then I got kicked out of my club and then I got let back in. And she's just going on. I kind of sneak in there and I grab the microphone and I say, it sounds like you both really care about your club and the work you do. Now, I didn't get into the details of who hit who and who said what because it wasn't important. And that's not the story she was telling me. What she was telling me is how much she cares about the work they do. Now, the rest of the audience, I got to ask them and say, well, how is that for every one of you? And the answer is, it's exhausting. It's exhausting trying to figure out all those details, trying to adjudicate who's right and who's wrong. It's exhausting versus listening for what the person actually wants to tell you underneath it. And a tool for someone who does ramble on and on and on about something, what you can always ask them is, hey, of what you just shared with me, what's the most important thing you want me to know? And it's a very honoring way of them being able to then reflect and tell you what are those things you want them to know. So I'll share with you a little bit more about why I'm so inspired to do this work, and has to do around building walls, and become even more important with what the conversations we're having recently, building around our countries. And in 2015, there were 85 deaths from foreign nationals, but more importantly, there was 17,000 homicides in the US. And so that might think, okay, we'll put a wall around our communities, and then we'll be safe. But unfortunately, 80% of those homicides were committed by somebody we know. So you can put a wall around your house, and surely you'll be safe then, except that a majority of those were loved ones or immediate family members. So then you think, well, I'll lock myself in my room, and then I'll be isolated, and then I'll be safe. And we've heard that word isolation a lot recently with the COVID-19. And this is probably the most dangerous place for you to be, because 44,000 Americans committed suicide in 2015, 1.1 million attempted it. And it's not just suicide, unfortunately. When you add drinking, smoking, obesity, and drug overdoses, you are 80 times more likely to kill yourself than to be killed by somebody else. And I don't want to pick on Americans, because it's worldwide that suicide actually kills more people than war, homicide, and terrorism combined. And so what is the role of Rotary in this? And what I propose is, because of the communities we build, the leadership that we can do around peace, and the way we connect with each other, with ourselves, and with our community, makes us uniquely not just qualified and not just have a role, but I would propose that we have a responsibility in times like this, when we're told to isolate, that we as Rotarians can hear that word differently and say, we're called to connect. And we're called to connect on different levels and multiple levels, because we have the creativity, we have the networks, and we have the will to do it as people of action. And so with that, I'd like to open it up and for any questions you all might have. Perhaps, Rosie, would you like to lead the Q&A, or how would you like to, how have you done in the past?
That's how we do it. It's good.
Great.
They can type something in, and hopefully we'll get to everything. All right. Arthur Clark says, we might think about having the peace symbol spokes in the Rotary wheel be a different color or highlighted.
Yeah, they're already there. Yeah, the four spokes of peace already.
Right.
Or the six spokes. Okay,
Patty Merritt, will you tell us about one specific project or action you have done?
Yeah, so I think one of the most fun ones right now is the work I mentioned with the Nisga'a Nation. The incoming district governor-elect, Dave Hamilton, had a vision for 2021 to be able to have his peace conference on territory with the Nisga'a. And so what they asked MBVI to do is to design a process where we can meet each other in the middle. And so we're using the peace conversation facilitation process to train Nisga'a in facilitation and train Rotarians in facilitation, and we have an all nations group as well. And so we're going to host dialogues leading up to the conference. And then so that at the conference, we'll have 400 or 500 attendees that are both Indigenous and Rotarian, being able to hold conversations on difficult subjects that are most important to that district. And so creating that format and that bond that's going to be able to move forward together. And so that we don't have two different, that Rotary can even transcend into those communities as well.
Okay, thank you. And DG Andre says, what aspect of your training as a Peace Fellow was most useful to your work, and why?
Yeah, so I think the sensitivities I spoke about earlier, but I think the biggest thing you learn is humility, and that I don't have the answers for any other for any other groups. And everywhere we work, there's always someone who has capabilities locally. So we don't need to come in and save anybody. What we can do is create support and infrastructure and help them to have the answers and find the answers themselves. And so there was our last conference, there was a Nobel laureate, and he said, humility being the most important ingredient in peace building. And if you can't be humble, fake it. That we need to come with humility into these communities, not as if we have answers, but asking really, really good questions. Thank you for that question.
More questions?
Great. Yeah, so I'll also share with you, so that flyer I shared with you about online engagement. So I'll share with you some of the best practices we've been doing. I've gone over some of them here, but I'll share that with you. We put that together, and so maybe little tricks and things you can add to this meeting that makes it a bit more, just a little more colorful and engaging, and always pushing ourselves to add to that. Andre asked about disruptors. And one of the things with our conference we were encouraged to do is to, as Peace Fellows, not work through Rotary, which seems a bit counter to what you might think, but so that we could be disruptors and push Rotary. And so Peace Fellows as nudgers, that there are certain things and topics that we can't speak about outright within Rotary because it's political or considered divisive. And one of the words that I've learned with working with clubs with a lot of conflict and working through this is we tend to use the word political as interchangeable with we don't have the skills to talk about it, and we're afraid it won't be a productive conversation. Because any conversation can become political, but we've used it as shorthand for I don't think we can have a successful conversation around this. And so being able to use facilitators and increase our communication skills and our awareness and around certain topics can allow us to expand what we can talk about and address the communities, the communities we serve and the communities we're in more robustly if we can talk about these subjects. So being a disruptor means sometimes nudging Rotary in that direction. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that out loud. As a mediator, I'm supposed to stay neutral, but sometimes requires stepping outside of that role a bit.
So Martin, how can any of those that are online here today contact you if they had a follow-up question, or they would have an interest in having you be a speaker, if not for their club? I know that you do a lot of work with schools and school districts, and maybe you could also just briefly mention some of the work that you're doing in relation to school shootings and stuff, trying to work with school districts.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I still do teach at high school and college as well, but high school because it's such a wonderful return on investment. Working with adults, no offense, but there's a lot of hurdles and unlearning that has to happen. And when you work with youth, they get it because it's so real for them and so present for them. But giving them the tools to resolve their own conflict. One of the questions came up around peace education and why that's important in light of what's going on and sort of the false dichotomy we're being pushed with right now of it's either health or economy. And what peace education teaches you is that the world doesn't work in a binary way, and that truth actually lies within paradoxes, and that it's an and situation. We can have an economy and a healthy society. We can be involved in both. We can have conservative values and liberal values held at the same time. There's no reason why we need to be one or the other. And what peace builders do is be able to have people feel safe in that dichotomy. It feels like chaos, but chaos is not terrible. It's what you assign to it. And so youth being more open to this way of thinking and be able to think that way moving forward, that we don't get stuck in either or decisions as if we have to choose one or the other. And we can have new leaders in the area of peace that can hold these communities and find a more unified way forward.
So could you maybe, we do a couple of things. We could have you write in the chat box how they would get a hold of you, or I could send something out. Probably be easier if you just wrote it in the chat box for those that are on.
Yeah, so I put my my email is there. I'll include a WhatsApp number if that's a preferred way of communicating. And any requests either between the slides or any information I can forward you about the conferences and upcoming conferences or webinars or the database. I'd love to share all that with you, so you can use that for your individual clubs. Topic of violence as a tool for peace. It's an interesting concept. At Burning Man, there was one sign that said, if violence isn't the answer, you're asking the wrong question. But I think that's that's a bit different than what we're talking about here. Maybe, is it Causeway? Could you elaborate on that question a little bit?
Okay, yeah, it's Dale, actually. It's my wife's name on the screen
Okay.
there. Yeah, I was just, as you were talking about the tools that you use to use peace, I think there's an innate tendency to try to resolve things physically sometimes. Maybe it starts from when we're children and someone says, if you guys can't get along together, go outside and fight it out between the two of you. And I'm wondering if maybe we see that example extended into countries and communities as well. And maybe there is some positive, productive element related to that, but it also looks like it can be very destructive. So, just curious, in your using that in your toolbox, if there are appropriate situations where maybe some types of physical confrontation is appropriate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's a good segue for talking about violence. And one of the things I encourage in my sessions and convening large groups is the use of anger and aggression. Because telling somebody to calm down is rarely a successful position. Instead, I might ask a question like, sounds like you're angry. Would you like to be more angry? And in that question, it seems startling, but once you give someone permission to be angry, you'll find they no longer need to be angry. And why that is because of a cycle. And in terms of a tool, if you only learn one thing from today, this is a pretty good one. The reason why you raise your voice is two reasons. One is, I don't feel listened to. And the other one is, I care about what I'm talking about. If I wasn't passionate and I didn't feel listened to, I wouldn't raise my voice. In nature, we don't extend any more energy than we have to. And so it also works reflexively. If you hear yourself yelling, you know those two things are present. That I care about what I'm talking about and I don't feel listened to. One of the people not listening to you while you're yelling is you. And so just repeating back to somebody what they said will immediately calm them down because they get to hear themselves. You have to do it without sarcasm. You have to do it without another further attack yourself, but just hearing them. And again, that listening piece, you're not agreeing with them. You're just hearing them. When someone doesn't feel listened to, it goes to the next level, it elevates. So if yelling didn't work, then we use aggression and violence. Women, that tends to be aggressive words because women develop psychologically their emotions faster than men do. Men, it tends to be aggression, physical aggression. We express ourselves physically. In prison, they did a survey, and the more aggressive you were was the fewer vocabulary words you had to describe your feelings. So there's a direct correlation to that. Then it's physical violence. I physically get your attention by holding your arm, hurt you somehow. And then the final level is aggression towards yourself, is how and some people that hurt themselves in order to express themselves. And so when you talk about the role of violence and aggression, it's one of my roles is to be able to express yourself in the lower rungs so you don't need to get to the higher rungs. And so it very much is a tool that we can use to allow people the space to feel the emotions they need to feel, to be angry, and let them know they're safe in that space. So thank you for the question. Great.
So I'm sorry, we're bumping up against the end of our time here, and I just wanted to express my gratitude for your taking time to be with us today. You're an inspiration, and not only your story, but the way that you have a perspective is refreshing. And I think many of us would like to live a life where we could have the same perspective that you could, or you do. And if any of you has any closing thoughts, maybe you could share them, and then we'll wrap up the meeting. But feel free to say what you were going to say, Martin. And I think maybe I interrupted you.
Oh, nope, I was just going to wrap it up as well. So thank you. Thank you for that. Great. So thank you all. And yeah, I look forward to partnering with you and working with you in the future. If you're interested in going to that 5040 conference, we're going to be up in Terrace, which is darn near close to Alaska, which I know is not a tiny little state. So I know it's not a hop, skip, and a jump, but I would love to meet you all in person someday.
I'd just like to share with our Rotary members from 5010, Thursday night's forum, the focus will be on recognizing a couple of businesses here in Fairbanks that have stepped up during the time of this pandemic. One is Auto Trim Design. Ben Boswood is going to tell a little story about how they helped a local Fairbanks Memorial Hospital by making masks that they donated for the first responders and the hospital health staff. And the other is Life Water Engineering, and they worked with a trooper detachment captain here in Fairbanks, Ron Wall, who's also going to be on the meeting. And they're going to talk about a light system that they are using in 8 different detachments now across the state of Alaska, based on a conversation that the two of them had, and how that led to helping keep the trooper vehicles and helicopters, and even for that matter, people that they arrest and put in the back of the trooper car are safe because of this technology. So it's kind of a fascinating story. I know there's stories similar to it around the state, but I'd like to have you hear those. So if you can join us at 7 o'clock on Thursday night. And then next Tuesday, we will have Reem Gunayam, who is the executive director for the Rotary Peace Action Group. And she was one of our keynote speakers for our peace conference that we had to cancel. So I'm glad that she's able to join us, and you'll have a chance to meet her. So thank you all. Hope you have a great week. Don't hesitate to call me or text me, email me if you've got any other questions or suggestions. Thank you.
And one last reminder, if you know anybody who's a candidate to be a Peace Fellow, they've still got just a couple more days. The end of the month is the last day to send in an application. We have no applications from our district yet.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.